An old man sat alone at a diner counter. When his bill came, he opened his wallet, went very still, and said nothing. I quietly paid for him and walked out. I had no idea that the embarrassed stranger I helped that morning had once commanded entire armies as a 4-star general. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a Thursday morning in late October. I work as a plumber in a small town called Millbrook. I go to a diner called Patty's Place before work most mornings. That particular Thursday I came in around 7, hung my jacket on the hook near the door, and sat down at my usual stool at the counter. The diner was not very full. There was an older couple near the window. A young woman with a baby stroller at a table nearby. A man reading a newspaper at the far end of the counter. And then there was the old man sitting 2 stools away from me. He had white hair, cut short and neat. His face was deeply lined. His hands were large and rough-looking. He was wearing dark trousers, a light blue button-up shirt, and a gray jacket that was old but clean. There was nothing special about him. He just looked like a quiet old man who had come in for breakfast by himself. He was very still. Most people at diners move around, check their phones, look toward the kitchen. This man did not move at all. He sat with his back straight and his hands flat on the table and looked straight ahead. There was something about the way he held himself that I noticed without being able to explain. Margaret, one of the regular servers, came over and took my order. She is a cheerful woman in her 50s with short red hair. She greeted me, wrote down my order, then went down the counter to check on the old man. I was not trying to listen. But the diner was quiet and they were close enough that I could hear most of what was said. Margaret asked him if he was ready to order. He said yes. He ordered oatmeal, 1 piece of toast, and a cup of tea. His voice was low and steady. A few minutes later Margaret brought his food. He ate slowly and carefully. He did not have a phone on the table. He just ate and looked out the window at the street outside. Every now and then a car would pass, or someone would walk by, and he would watch for a moment and then go back to his oatmeal. My food came. I ate. I drank my coffee. The diner got a little busier. The young woman with the baby left. The older couple near the window ordered more coffee. The man with the newspaper folded it up and paid and left. At some point I looked over at the old man again. He had finished his food. He had set his spoon down neatly beside his bowl. He was looking down at the table and he was very still again. Then I saw it. His face had changed. Just slightly, but I noticed it. Something uncomfortable was there now. He looked down at the small paper bill that Margaret had placed near his elbow. He picked it up and looked at it and I saw his jaw tighten just a little. He set it down. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out a wallet. He opened it. He looked inside it for a moment. Then he closed it again very slowly. He sat there. He did not call Margaret over. He did not look around for help. He just sat there quietly with the closed wallet on the table in front of him and the bill beside it and that expression on his face that was not quite embarrassment and not quite distress but was somewhere in between. I have been in that position before. Not in a long time but I remember it. I remember what it feels like to open your wallet and see almost nothing there. I remember the quick hot feeling in your face and the way you start thinking fast about what you can do. Can you leave? Can you explain? Will anyone notice? It is a terrible feeling. It is the kind of feeling that no one should have to sit with alone. I did not think very hard about what I did next. I just did it. I caught Margaret's eye as she was passing. I pointed quietly with 2 fingers, first at the old man and then at myself. She understood right away. She nodded once and did not make any fuss about it. That is one of the things I have always appreciated about Margaret. She understands things without needing them spelled out. The old man did not see any of this. He was still looking at the table. I paid my bill when Margaret brought it. His breakfast had been added to mine. I left a tip that covered both of us, put on my jacket, and headed toward the door. I was not trying to make a moment out of it. I was not looking for a thank you. I just did not want him to sit there feeling that way any longer than he had to. I was almost at the door when I heard him. "Excuse me," he said. I stopped and turned around. He was looking at me. He had turned on his stool to face me and his eyes were clear and direct. They were gray eyes and they had an alertness in them that surprised me. Up close, those eyes looked younger than the rest of his face. "Did you pay my bill?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, sir. It was no trouble." He looked at me for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "You did not have to do that." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." Another pause. Then he said, "I had the money. It was just in another pocket." I believed him and I did not believe him. It did not matter. "I am sure you did," I said. "Enjoy your morning, sir." I turned to go again. "Son," he said. Something in the way he said that word made me stop again. It was a single word but it had the weight of a much longer sentence in it. I turned back. He was still looking at me with those clear gray eyes. "Thank you," he said. "That was a kind thing." He said it simply and directly, the way you say something that you mean completely. Not overly warm, not stiff. Just true. "You are welcome," I said. And then I left. I thought about him a little on my way to my first job of the day. I thought about the way he had sat, the steadiness of his voice. I figured he was probably a veteran. He had that quality that some older men have, a kind of quietness that comes from having been somewhere hard and having come back from it. I hoped his day got better. Then I got to work and stopped thinking about it. 3 days passed. On Sunday evening I was at home watching television when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer but I did. "Is this Daniel Hartley?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I said. "My name is Carol," she said. "I am calling on behalf of my father. You paid for his breakfast at Patty's place on Thursday morning. He wanted to reach you." I was surprised. I said yes, that was me, and asked how he had gotten my number. She said he had asked Margaret at the diner who I was and Margaret had looked up my number in the town directory. I laughed a little at that. The town directory. Only in Millbrook. Carol asked if I would be willing to come for a short visit. Her father wanted to thank me in person. She said he was not the type to let something like this go without a proper acknowledgement. I said sure, of course, and we set a time for the following Saturday afternoon. She gave me an address. It was not far from Millbrook, maybe 20 minutes out on a rural road. I wrote it down and said I would be there. I did not know what to expect. I thought maybe I was going to sit in someone's living room and have tea with a retired veteran and his daughter. Maybe he would tell me a story or two. I thought it would be a pleasant and slightly awkward hour and then I would drive home. I was not prepared for what actually happened. I drove out on Saturday. The address took me down a long gravel road through bare trees. At the end of the road there was a farmhouse. It was old but well cared for, white paint, green shutters, a wide front porch. There were a few other cars in the gravel lot near the house. More than I expected for a quiet visit. A woman in her late 40s answered the door. This was Carol. She was pleasant and calm and had her father's gray eyes. She thanked me for coming and led me inside. The inside of the house was warm and clean. There were framed photographs on the walls. As I was led down the hallway I noticed them. They were military photographs. Men in uniform. Men standing in front of flags. Official portraits. Group photos. A man shaking hands with someone who looked very much like a past president of the United States. I looked more carefully at the photographs as we passed them. In many of them I could make out the face of the old man from the diner. Younger versions of his face, but the same gray eyes, the same straight posture, the same way of holding himself. I noticed something else. On the collars of the uniform in the photographs there were stars. 4 of them. 4 stars. I stopped walking for a moment. I am not an expert on military ranks, but I know enough to know that 4 stars means something. It means you are at the very top. A 4-star general. That is not a rank that many people reach. That is a rank that takes a lifetime of service and sacrifice and leadership. Carol had noticed that I stopped. She turned and saw me looking at the photographs. "That is my father," she said quietly. "General Raymond Alton Briggs, retired. He served for 41 years. I stood there for a moment just looking at the photographs. I did not know what to say. "He never makes a big deal of it," Carol added. "He has never been the kind of man who does." She led me into a sitting room at the back of the house. The old man was there, sitting in a chair near the window, the same way he had been sitting at the diner counter. Back straight. Hands in his lap. Completely still. There were 2 other people in the room. A man about Carol's age who turned out to be her husband, and an older woman seated on the sofa who was introduced as an old family friend. The general looked up when I came in. He stood up to greet me and he was taller than I expected. He extended his hand and I shook it. His grip was firm and steady. "Mr. Hartley," he said. "Thank you for coming." We sat down. Carol brought coffee. For a few minutes we made ordinary conversation about Millbrook, about the weather, about how long I had been living there. The general listened carefully and spoke carefully. He did not use extra words. Everything he said was direct and clear. Then he said, "I want to explain about Thursday." I started to say that he did not have to, that it really was no trouble, but he raised one hand slightly and I stopped. "I had a bad week," he said. "Some things did not go as planned with certain finances. I had intended to handle it, but by Thursday morning I had not yet. I went to the diner because I needed to be somewhere normal for a little while. I realized when the bill came that the only money I had on me was the wrong card and some very small change. I was working out what to do when you handled it for me." He paused. "I have been in situations far more difficult than that in my life," he said. "But there is something about being embarrassed over something small and ordinary that has its own particular sting. You handled it in the kindest possible way. You did not make it visible. You did not make me feel helped. You just quietly took care of it and left." I did not know what to say to that. I said something like, "It was the right thing to do, I was glad I could help." He shook his head slightly. "The right thing to do is more rare than people say. Most people look away from small discomforts. You did not. That matters." We talked for a long time that afternoon. Much longer than I expected. The general told me about his life, not in a boastful way, but in a conversational way, the way an old person sometimes talks when they feel comfortable. He had grown up poor in a small town in Tennessee. His father had worked in a factory. His mother had cleaned other people's houses. He had joined the army at 18 because it was the best option he could see. He had not expected to stay. He had stayed for 41 years. He talked about the places he had been. Korea, though just at the end. Vietnam. Later, other places that he named without detail. He talked about the men he had served with and the men he had commanded. He talked about what it felt like to be responsible for other people's lives. He talked about the weight of it. He talked about coming home. He said coming home was always strange. The world outside the military moved differently. People worried about different things. He said he had always respected that, had always understood that civilians and soldiers lived in different worlds, but that there had been times when he had felt very alone in a room full of people who did not know what he carried. He talked about his wife. She had died 6 years before. He said she had been the one who made all the civilian parts of life feel real to him. He said that without her the world sometimes felt thin. I listened. I did not try to fix anything or respond too much. I just listened. I think that was what he wanted. Someone to sit with and talk to on a Saturday afternoon. At one point he said, "You know what I remember most clearly from 41 years in the army?" I said no. "Small kindnesses," he said. "Not the medals. Not the promotions. Not the operations. The small kindnesses. A soldier who brought you coffee without being asked. A man who stayed up with you when you could not sleep. A stranger who did something quiet and decent when you needed it." He looked at me steadily. "Those are the things that stay," he said. "The rest fades." Before I left that afternoon, the general stood up again and shook my hand. He held it a moment longer than a standard handshake and he looked at me directly. "I want you to know something," he said. "I have met presidents. I have met heads of state. I have sat in rooms with some of the most powerful people in the world. And I am telling you honestly that genuine human decency is rarer than any of those things. What you did on Thursday was genuinely decent. I hope you know that." I drove home in the late afternoon light. The trees on either side of the road were bare and the sky was a pale orange behind the clouds. I felt something that I did not have a clean word for. Not pride exactly. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than both of those things. I thought about what he had said. About small kindnesses. About how the big things fade and the small things stay. I think he was right. I have lived long enough to see it play out. The things I remember most clearly from my own life are not the big events. They are the small moments when someone was kind to me when they did not have to be. The neighbor who shoveled my driveway without asking when I was sick. The stranger who pushed my truck out of the mud on a back road. The woman at the pharmacy who waived the copay one time when I was short. Small things. But they stay. I had not thought of paying for the old man's breakfast as anything significant. It was a few dollars. It was a Thursday morning gesture, the kind of thing you do and forget by lunchtime. But to him it was something else. Not because of the money. Because of the way it was done. Because someone had seen him in a small moment of difficulty and had acted without making it into a scene, without asking for anything, without making him feel small. Because the dignity had been preserved. I think about dignity a lot now, more than I used to. I think about how much of what people need is not money or resources or solutions. It is just to have their dignity left intact. To not be made to feel small. To have someone treat them the way they would want to be treated on their best day even when they are having their worst one. General Briggs and I kept in touch after that. Not frequently, but regularly. Every few weeks I would call or he would call. We would talk for 20 or 30 minutes. He would ask about my work and I would ask about his. He told me more stories about his years in the army. I told him about growing up in Millbrook and about the people I knew and the jobs I had done. We were very different people from very different worlds, but we got along easily. He came into Patty's place once more that I know of, a few months after the first time. Margaret told me about it. She said he had come in by himself, sat at the counter, ordered oatmeal and tea, eaten slowly, and paid his bill in full when it came. She said he had left a very generous tip. She said he had nodded at her on the way out the same way someone nods when they are completing something that had been left unfinished. I like that. I like the idea of him going back to finish something. I am not telling this story because I want credit for what I did. A few dollars at a diner is not something that deserves a story. I am telling it because of what happened after. Because of what I learned from spending time with that man. Because of what he said about small kindnesses and how they stay. We are surrounded by chances every single day to do small decent things for people around us. Most of the time we do not notice them. We are busy or tired or distracted, or we just do not think it is our business. And maybe sometimes it is not. But sometimes it is. Sometimes there is a person sitting 2 stools away from you who is quietly struggling with something, and all they need is for someone to see it and respond without making it into a big thing. You do not know who that person is. You do not know what they have lived through, or what they have sacrificed, or what they are carrying. You do not know if they are a veteran or a teacher or a parent who is barely holding it together, or a retired 4-star general who commanded armies and shaped history. You do not know. That is the point. You do not know, and it does not matter. You respond to the person in front of you as they are right now, in this moment, with what they need right now. That is all you have to do. General Briggs passed away about 1.5 years after we met. Carol called to tell me. It was not unexpected. He had been in declining health for several months. She said he had gone quietly, at home, with family around him. She also told me something that I did not expect. She said that in the last few weeks of his life, when he was mostly resting and not able to talk much, he had asked her to read to him from a small notebook he kept. She said he had kept this notebook for decades. It was full of names and moments. Not famous names, not famous moments. Just ordinary people and the ordinary things they had done that had stayed with him over the years. My name was in it. I am not going to pretend it did not mean something to me. It meant a great deal. But what I have thought about since is the notebook itself. The fact that he kept it. The fact that he had been recording names and moments for decades, collecting evidence of ordinary human decency the way another person might collect stamps or coins. That is something. That is a man who understood something real about the world and about what matters in it. I keep a notebook now too. Not because I want to copy him. Because after hearing about his, I realized I had been keeping one in my head for years without knowing it. I have names and moments stored in my memory that I return to the same way you return to a warm room on a cold day. I just had never written them down. I write them down now. The neighbor with the shovel. The stranger with the mud. The woman at the pharmacy. Others. More than I realized. It is a good exercise. It reminds you that the world is better than it sometimes seems. It reminds you that people have been kind to you, that you have been held up at various points in your life by the hands of people who did not have to reach out but did. It makes you want to be in someone else's notebook someday. I already am. That is more than enough. I still go to Patty's place on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I still sit at the same stool. I still order the same thing. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee, small orange juice. Margaret still knows my order before I sit down. But now I pay a little more attention to who else is in the room. I notice when someone looks still in a way that is not peaceful. I notice when someone looks down at a bill in a way that tells a story. I notice when someone might need something quiet and simple done for them. Most mornings nothing happens. Most mornings everyone pays their own bill and goes about their day, and so do I. But some mornings something small happens. And now I know to pay attention. I have told this story to a few people over the years. Not many. Just close friends, and once to my brother when we were sitting on his back porch one summer evening. Every time I tell it, people ask the same question. They ask, "Were you surprised that he was a general?" And every time I say the same thing. Yes and no. Yes, I was surprised. I did not expect the photographs on the wall or the stars on the collar or the 41 years of service. I did not expect to shake the hand of a man who had done the things he had done. That part was genuinely surprising. But no, I was not surprised by who he was as a person. Because the way he carried himself in that diner, the way he sat still and kept his dignity and spoke carefully and meant what he said, that did not surprise me at all. I had sensed something serious and decent about him from the first moment I noticed him. I just did not know the shape of it yet. We often assume that a person's importance is visible. We assume that someone who has done great things will look a certain way or carry themselves in a way that announces it. But it does not work like that. The most serious people I have met in my life have almost always been quiet about it. They do not need to fill the room. They already know who they are. General Briggs was like that. He was not trying to seem like anything. He was just being who he was. And who he was someone decent and careful and honest. All of that was clear before I ever saw a photograph. I think that is the part of the story that means the most to me now, looking back. Not the surprise of finding out who he was, but the fact that it did not change how I had seen him. I had treated him like a person worth treating with care before I knew anything about his rank or his service. And that is how it should be. That is how it has to be if kindness is going to mean anything at all. Because if you only treat people well when you know they are important, that is not kindness. That is strategy. Real kindness is when you do not know and you do it anyway. When you respond to the person in front of you simply because they are a person and they are in a small moment of difficulty and you can do something about it. That is the whole thing. That is all of it. I have a good life in Millbrook. It is a quiet life. I fix pipes and I drink coffee and I sit at the same stool twice a week and I look out at the same street I have been looking at for years. Some people might think that is a small life. Maybe it is. But I think small lives can hold large things. I think the ordinary days are where most of the meaning actually lives. Not in the big moments that you plan for and anticipate, but in the regular Tuesday mornings, the unremarkable Thursdays, the days when nothing special is supposed to happen. On one of those days I sat down next to an old man and did something small. And it turned out to be one of the most significant things I have done in my life. Not because of who he turned out to be, but because of what it started. A friendship I did not expect. Conversations I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And a way of moving through the world that I think I understand better now than I did before. Pay attention. Be decent. Keep it quiet. That is what I learned from General Raymond Alton Briggs, 4-star general, veteran of 41 years, man who kept a notebook full of ordinary names and moments. That is what I carry with me every morning when I walk into Patty's Place and sit down at my stool and wait for my coffee. It is enough. It is more than enough. I want to say one more thing for anyone reading this who has ever been in that chair. The one the old man was in. The one where you look down at a bill and the numbers do not work out the way you need them to. Where you sit very still and keep your face calm and your hands steady and try to figure out what to do while nobody is watching. If you have been there, you know that the worst part is not the money. The worst part is the feeling that you are suddenly visible in a way you did not choose to be. That your difficulty is about to become public. That someone is going to see you in a moment that you would not have chosen to share. What I hope, if you have been in that chair, is that someone handled it the way it should be handled. Quietly. Without theater. Without making you feel small. And if they did, I hope you remember them. I hope their name is somewhere in your memory, stored without ceremony, visited sometimes without warning. And if no one handled it for you that time, if you sat there and worked it out on your own or asked for help, I hope you know that the moment did not define you. It was just a moment. Everyone has them. The general had them. I have had them. The people sitting in diners all over this country this morning are having them. We are all just people trying to get through the day. And most of the time, if we pay attention, we can make it a little easier for the person next to us. That is the whole story. That is all I have.